it's a presentation you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I can share this. Yeah. I can share, no worries.
Okay. Let's get started. And I'm delighted to introduce Pete Canaluccio, our guest speaker for today. Pete is the expert in the area of brand licensing. And fortunately, that's one area I know the least about. So this was really made for us. And like I said, we're doing branding in three sections. We had Chris Campana last time, and I talked about the brand equity stuff, and now Pete will talk about brand licensing. And Pete has a lot of experience with various companies working with their licensing projects, including Coca-Cola. The Russia Olympics, right?
Russia Olympics, Vancouver Olympics, Salt Lake Olympics, Chicago Olympics.
Great. And we have a phrase, but this is true, that Pete has actually wrote the book on brand licensing. So he actually has a book on brand licensing. Okay? So Pete will go on till about 8:15, 8:20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk a little bit about brand extensions through licensing. Thank you for the introduction. Always good to be back. I'm a part-time instructor at Georgia State, so it's kind of fun too. But I've been teaching undergrad, so it's great to be able to teach some of the higher level folks. So today I want to share with you a presentation I actually gave to a licensing conference in LA about 2 weeks ago. And this is kind of like a higher tier level presentation. And the idea is kind of think about brand licensing and brand extensions as more a strategic solution than a tactical one, which is what a lot of people today are thinking about is, okay, how do I sweat my assets? How do I get more money out of it? No, this is how do I create a bigger universe, a better universe for my consumers so that they're engaging and having a better experience, and therefore they want to buy more of my products, engage more with me, and we build brand love. And so what I started doing with a co-author named Mark Bisoma, who is a brand strategist out of New Zealand, is to work on a book which is about 95%, at least through the first draft. And the whole idea was how do we think about brands and growing brands and the challenge of brand growth. I think it was McKinsey who did a study that said about 90% of the companies never hit their brand growth target, which is a really dismal, it's worse than like the Mendoza line for baseball, I think, right? So everybody needs to use all the resources at their disposal, and this is one that lots of folks just don't have really any insights on. So what we've done in the book is we interviewed about 40 top folks in different industries, with big brands, and some were licensees, on how they're using brand extensions through licensing to grow their brands. And it's been fun. Everybody from Simon Waters, who heads up Hasbro's consumer products business, which is a multi-billion-dollar business, to Jennifer Dorian, who's the general manager of Turner Classic Movies, to folks at Coca-Cola, NFL Properties, et cetera, et cetera. And it's been great being able to get their inputs and be able to develop this book and this presentation. So let me just funnel through. So the whole idea here is, everything is really centered around the idea of the story and what's your story and how do you convey your story, right? You think about things like why I do what I do, what do I do, and how do I do it. And the why is that compelling reason for why you get up in the morning and why you're building the business you're building. And the what is really more of the kind of the strategies of how you're getting to that goal, and the how is more of the tactics. And so when you think about a long story like you would read a novel, brand owners have to also think about their own long story. And how do they convey that story? And so we'll dive into a number of examples how these different brands that we've talked to are doing just that. So I had a really cool experience of interviewing a guy named John Friend. John actually used to live in Atlanta, so he's got a cell phone that says he's from, it's like a 404, 678 or something like that. But he actually lives in Seattle, and he works for Microsoft. And he's responsible for all of the Halo licensed merchandise, which according to him at this point, and this brand has been around for 15 years, the licensed merchandise revenue sales are about 50% of their overall sales of the game. And pretty soon they're actually going to exceed the game, which is a really powerful story about how extensions can really enable you to reach a number of consumers. And so when we talked to him, we were all about, okay, tell us what you're doing to grow the Halo brand and what does that look like. And so he got some key learnings from Lucasfilm and about this whole idea of taking a long view. And one of the most powerful things about that is for the Halo brand, and this is neat especially for a public company, they look at 10-year horizons. Anybody work for a company that ever looked at a 10-year horizon in their budgeting? It just doesn't happen. So this is a kind of cool thing where they can look out and go, how do we connect with our consumers, our users, our enthusiasts in a way that doesn't put a lot of pressure on us for next quarter or even next year? And one of the cool things about this is, they initially, and this is prevalent in every gaming company, right? They're looking at how many units am I selling, how many games am I selling, and these guys are not looking at either of those. They're saying, how much engagement time do we have? How much time are folks actually playing our game? And that's the most relevant measurement, right? Because if you have a box in your house and you're never using it, or you have they've sold 10 million units of their game, but nobody's playing it, then that's not as important as actually getting on the game and playing the game. And today, this is getting really exciting because, and I'm not into this, but I can still get excited, is there are competitions where they will fill up literally like a basketball arena of folks who watch folks who are best in class at this game play the game. And so now they're thinking about ways of not only making the game relevant and exciting, but actually making it fun to watch the game. Make it fun to watch somebody else play the game, which is kind of a crazy idea, but when you have 15,000 people watching, which are now bona fide celebrities, right? These are folks competing at the world-class level, and they're from all over the world. It's taking this thing to a whole different level. So I had the opportunity to talk to a gentleman named Rick White, who was a former CEO of Major League Baseball Properties. And it was great to talk to him because he got involved in helping Major League Baseball create a whole line of branded merchandise back when all of the rights to these different baseball properties, different cities, was controlled at each of those cities. And back then, it wasn't the New York Yankees who had the #1 brand licensing program, which is arguably like the top 3 in the world, right? Manchester United might be #1. But back then, it was the Milwaukee Brewers, which is kind of crazy to think about one of these small, not even like a mid-scale team, but really a small city team. And that was just because they were interested in that, and everybody else was more interested in playing baseball and filling seats. But these guys were thinking about it. So Rick got involved, and he said, look, we've got to bring this all together. We've got to get all of our teams speaking from the same sheet of music. We've got to go to all of our rights kind of controlled in one space. When somebody signs up a license with Major League Baseball, they're signing up for all the teams. And whether it's creating baseball cards, and I actually had a conversation with a guy today who works for Topps, which was just coincidental. We have to do this in an orchestrated way. And so they did that, and over a short period of time, it was funny because the Yankees chose to hang on, they were like the Notre Dame of Major League Baseball. So they weren't participating. Everybody else was involved, and they were like, we want a better deal. We want a better deal. And eventually they did get a better deal. And this probably makes sense when you've won, 26 world championships. But in either case, once they got all of this going, the idea of selling licensed merchandise became much, much more relevant and much more successful. And one of the things that was so prevalent is this whole idea of authentics, right? If it's worn on the field, that's what I want to buy. I don't want to wear some cheap substitute. I want to wear what my favorite player is wearing. And so that got the business really growing for everyone. And then the next evolution of that was kind of harbored in this idea that there was a problem in Major League Baseball when it came to this whole idea of nostalgia or all these old teams. And what I mean by that is, I don't even know what year, but back in the 1950s, the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles, right? But there was this whole thing for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and somebody in Brooklyn owned the rights to the Brooklyn Dodgers. Not Major League Baseball, not even the LA Dodgers. It was the Brooklyn Dodgers was owned by somebody who owned a bar or something in Brooklyn, and he was selling T-shirts. Crazy. But once they solved that problem and bought the rights from this guy, they realized there was a huge market for this nostalgic merchandise, right? And if there's the Brooklyn Dodgers, well, who are all the other teams that, or maybe not even a team with a different city name, like could be Atlanta, could be the instead of the Atlanta Braves, it could be the Milwaukee Braves. But this was even back to different uniforms, right? They wore that back in the 50s or the 60s or 70s. And so this whole idea around, they called it the Cooperstown Collection. And it really tapped into, understandably, the older generation who had grown up either watching them, like your grandfather or your great-grandfather, but also the sons of those great-grandfather, grandfather who heard about them. But even more so, they were tapping the millennials who were interested in wearing this nostalgic merchandise. So this idea of nostalgia can be really, really powerful for folks who have never even lived in that era. So just something to kind of consider. This was really cool. I had an opportunity to interview a guy named Steve Skeblo, and Steve and I actually were colleagues at Coca-Cola forever ago. It's about 20 years ago. And since then, he's become the general manager and vice president responsible for all of National Football League licensed Players Association merchandise, NFL Players Association. And one of the cool things they've done is they've teamed up with Discovery Education. And the whole idea is Discovery Education is talking about 3 million students a day. And what better way to get students excited about math and sciences than to interject a sport that a lot of them love. So this was a way for them to teach physics to maybe high school students, with the idea that if Brett Favre or Tom Brady or another quarterback could throw a ball to a receiver crossing the field and add an element of speed and wind into that, what was the trajectory of the football that it had to be at, and how did you calculate that, which made this really exciting for folks who probably are falling asleep before this happened. And there are some really smart football players who get into this, who were actually represented and came to some of these classes and said, look, let's talk about what it is that I do when I throw a football to get 40 yards down the field when there's a crosswind of 10 knots. So kind of a really cool way to engage. And the whole idea of all of this is this concept of building universes. So who are your consumers, who are your enthusiasts, who are your users, and how do you build this world where they are getting more value? And at the same time, you're building your brand, and therefore you're ultimately succeeding at this yardstick of business, which in some cases, like John Friend with Halo, is around the whole idea of a 10 or 15-year horizon. So what can universes learn from each other? What I like about this is the folks that do this better than anyone are the entertainment industry. This is the Disneys of the world, the Marvels of the world, the Halos of the world, and entertainment. You can swap out whether you're watching a feature film or you're playing a video game. They understand what entertainment means, and they understand how you make a compelling, engaging movie or game that keeps folks locked in, right? So what is the name? I think it was Zootopia. I think I recently watched by myself. No, sorry, not by myself, with my wife and no kids, right? I'm just watching this movie because it's so freaking entertaining, right? Especially that sloth. I mean, I just was like, I couldn't stop laughing. And here I'm like going, I'm an old guy watching this animated movie. But who here has watched Zootopia? Okay. Right hand up if you liked it. Left hand up if you disliked it. So that's the thing, right? They're making these films now for all ages, and they're really figuring out how they can enhance the experience. And so what brand owners, corporate brand owners need to do is figure out what are these guys doing in the entertainment industry? And we could throw sports into that as well, right? I think sports is a little bit behind the like the feature films and the gaming folks, but not by much. They really understand entertainment as well. In fact, in some cases, like some of these folks own sports and do entertainment, and so they're kind of figuring out, like Disney, don't they own the Ducks and also theme parks, and so the whole idea is they're getting it all. But if you're a brand owner, like you're working for, okay, let's think of a company that is not as well known as Coca-Cola, but still pretty well known. What's a fun, exciting brand? Maybe it's like even Harley Davidson. You were mentioning them earlier, right? What can we do to create the experience and make it more lifelike? And how can we tap into what the entertainment industry is doing to make their experience that much better? And that's the thing that I would say, there's a great benchmark out there, so see what they're doing and then figure out how you build that into your own model. So this is a cool one. Does anyone recognize what this is or where this is from? It's a good guess. This is actually Ferrari. And this is, I think it's in Abu Dhabi. This is the world's fastest roller coaster. So it makes sense, right? Ferrari's about speed and performance, and so they could connect themselves with the world's fastest roller coaster, and people get it. And so therefore that whole emotion, right? What does your brand stand for? How do you connect with people emotionally? That's what you need to do in order to build that brand love and build that connection. And, for those of you who know or don't know, Ferrari took a really significant step through licensing of creating luxury apparel. Because Ferrari's a luxury brand, right? Well, no. I mean, yes, it's expensive to buy a Ferrari, and it's all aspirational for most of us. But there's a whole host of players in the apparel industry that are luxury that are going to clean their clock, every day, 24 hours a day. So they ventured into something that they thought they could be in, but the truth is that's not what people connect with them. The point of connection is around what they do better than anything, which is to create speed. And so that when they finally figured that out, they said, okay, this is a better way to connect, and therefore we can have rides for young people and even older people who aspire to own a Ferrari one day, or maybe just want to have the rush of what a Ferrari feels like. So they're extending their reach with a brand connection for folks who never will actually ever sit in one of their cars. I know. Well, you have one, right? Professor Costa? Ferrari in your garage?
I was about to say, we're going for joyrides later.
Yeah, no Ferrari in my house either. So I had the privilege of interviewing Simon Waters, as I mentioned. He was a general manager of Hasbro, and I don't know how many years ago Hasbro used to call their business, licensing something or other. I don't even know what it's called, but it's now called Consumer Products, the Consumer Products Group. And what they do in that group is they they say, okay, what are our big brands and how do we connect with our consumers against those brands? And who are all the folks that are going to be involved in that? And sometimes it's a retailer and they're doing a direct-to-retail program like with the Toys R Us. Other times they're partnering with licensees to make merchandise that they don't make, or they're involving their own folks. But what they're doing is bringing all those resources together to create that phenomenal, wonderful experience for their consumers. And in his words, he says, we tell a story beyond the game. Consumers enter brands many ways. For this reason, we are in every category you can imagine. Fashion, home goods, bedding, stationery, location-based entertainment, Hasbro Live, theme parks, expressing our brands all the way around the consumer. Expansion takes consumers on a journey. So we just thought they were a company that made kids games, right? No, they're creating experiences, and while they're good at making the games, they're not good at those other things, but they're smart enough to figure out how to pull in all those other companies that are good at those things, who realize that Hasbro's got some phenomenal brands like Monopoly and Nerf and some of these others, Transformers, that they can create these phenomenal experiences. Like Transformers, right? That 15 years ago, kind of kind of like bumping along brand, and then they create all these feature films, and it just goes takes off like crazy, right? Because people are living the experience of the Transformer brand well beyond the products that these guys make, and effectively they become an entertainment company, right? So it's kind of creating this experience and taking them on a journey that they want to go on, and tying back to the point I made earlier, which is there's a story here too, and they're gonna know the story. And the cool thing, and I'll get into this in a little bit, is it used to be really important that you knew the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. And that worked really well in like the 60s and the 70s and 80s when there was only television. But today, people enter and exit all the time through multiple devices. So what companies have to do now is bring people in wherever they come and make them feel comfortable when they're coming in, even if they don't know the whole story. Somebody might know the whole one and maybe their experience is a little bit richer, but it's just as much fun for somebody who's coming in kind of like 80% of the way down the road or jumping off 40% of the way out. So just be thinking of those things as well. So this is the one I told you I talked to Jennifer Dorian. This is kind of fun. In 2000, well, I guess she left before that, but in 2000, Coca-Cola had a big reorganization, and right before that, a lot of folks were leaving for opportunities. And one of them was Jennifer Dorian. Her boss was a guy named Steve Koonin. Anybody ever heard of that name? Okay. Well, I won't tell him. Steve Koonin is actually he was a senior executive at Turner for a long time, but he's actually the CEO of the Atlanta Hawks basketball team. And what he did was he was a senior executive at Coca-Cola, and he brought up all of Coca-Cola's kind of brand strategy and knowledge to this industry called, entertainment through television. And he's the one that created all these brands like TNT, kind of being about drama, and TBS being about humor and all this. He took those principles and applied those. And he brought a couple of really first-class individuals with him, and one of them was Jennifer Dorian. And Jennifer now is the general manager of Turner Classic Movies, which has like the largest portfolio of movies on the planet. Is anyone familiar with how Turner TCM works? Does anyone watch this channel? Okay, you're nodding your head. How does it work? For the others to know. Have you? Okay. All right. Well, what I mean by that is, and it's not a trick question, is when you watch a movie on TCM, there's no commercials. They start out, they introduce the film, and you watch it like a feature film. So there's no interruptions, which is really kind of a cool way to watch it. And so Jennifer comes in, and she's a smart woman, and she's like, let's do some research. What's going on with these people that watch these movies? And what they discovered was a whole host of things, including like They like to get together and watch these movies. They like to watch these movies and drink wine together. And so it was kind of fun, in her words, and I guess she took over in 2009, she says, in 2009 we realized that fans wanted to get together and watch our movies. We asked, why are we not participating downstream? In other words, what were the brand connections that we could get? So we came up with 40 ideas for extensions, from party supplies to owning a casino. Ideas were small, large, crazy, and doable. The first out of the gate was a feature film. So they said, hey, what is our core? What's our root? It's around movies and watching movies. So let's create this whole idea of a film festival. And so they went to Old Hollywood and they rented out 7 venues and they showed a boatload of films over, I think, like a 4-day weekend. So you come with your friends and you watch, I don't know, maybe 10 films in 4 days, and you get to go to 7 different venues and you get to experience Old Hollywood, and you get to feel like you're part of this experience, right? And initially they thought, well, this is going to be a great moneymaker because we all need to drive more, top line and bottom line to our businesses. But what she said was, it turned out to be phenomenal. We thought we were doing it for money, but it wound up as our main DNA. Offering PR, marketing, brand love, fans loyalty, talent relations, industry distributor relations, it has become our calling card. So you think about it, it's like, you got this brand, it's got a lot of value, it's got a lot of equity, you're trying to figure out where to play, what categories to be in, right? And most folks are thinking about this, I call it small-minded thinking. They're thinking, okay, if I extend into this category and get this licensee to make this product, they'll sell hopefully a couple $1 million of it, and I'll get a couple $100,000 to my bottom line, and that'll help enable me to hit my budget targets, and I'll get a good bonus. No, they're thinking about how do we create a whole calling card around this idea of creating a film festival, which changes the whole conversation that they are having now with their consumers. And the interesting thing about this is they didn't make much money on that. But if you measured all the value that they got out of all that other stuff, they couldn't buy that if they tried. Turner wouldn't give them enough money to spend on all of what they got basically for free. But what they discovered on top of that is, here's a cool way to make money out of this. On top of all that. And this is the thing that drives me crazy because everybody who's not in licensing says, well, what's the royalty going to be? And they forget that you're getting product on shelf that wouldn't have been on shelf, you're getting product in markets that wouldn't have been in markets, you're getting product in channels that wouldn't have been in those channels. They're always interested in what's the royalty revenue. In this case, the royalty revenue is probably close to zero, but the overall revenue, the overall value might have been in the tens of millions, if not higher. But they figured out if they took this idea and put it on a cruise, then they had their captivated audience for, I don't know, 4 days, 7 days, whatever, and that did make them a lot of money. And by the way, the idea earlier about, people liking to get together and drink wine, well, that made a whole bunch of sense to them, and they now have a whole bunch of lines. They have a line of wines, and you drink a particular type of grape with a particular type of genre. And I don't know what it is, like maybe Pinots are with drama and Cabs are with comedies, but they've got that all figured out. And so all of these folks get together, they drink their wine, and they watch the movies. And all of this is getting done without Turner really having to spend an extra penny. Pretty phenomenal. So, how do you build an all-encompassing brand? There's this whole idea, and it was interesting because when we talked to John Friend, and by the way, I should tell you, I actually got to go to their studios at Microsoft, and I've not played the game Halo, but it was a pretty cool experience because when I went in there, and I'm a former Navy guy, so I love anything connected with the Navy, and their main, in fact, anyone here play Halo? Okay, what's the name of their hero or their main character? Master Chief. Master Chief is a senior enlisted rank in the Navy. So when I heard that, I was like, not Master Sergeant or whatever, right? No Army puke or Air Force guy. It was Master Chief, which was Navy SEAL. But I say that all in jest, but what he talked about was this whole idea of, what I was going to mention is this whole idea of wrapping around 360 degrees, like touching somebody at each point along the whole continuum. And what he talks about is like the 720 degrees. So like, I guess that's the 360 degree experience around the video, but then they try to add a piece around the licensed merchandise to create a whole nother. So like it's literally two planes where they're touching people in each degree along that plane on a circle. So, but if you think about it in the sense of just your own brand and what would it mean to be 360 degrees of connection, one example that comes to mind is what Cartoon Network is doing. So another Atlanta company, actually I think their offices are in New York, but they're here too. But what they've done is said, look, folks used to watch our television shows and they kind of needed to hear all this, from the beginning to the end. But now they realize that, sometimes it's literally the kid is grabbing mom's mobile phone and kind of like taking away from her so they can actually watch and engage with the brand in that environment, which might be while she's shopping, or they own their own tablet and they're watching it that way, or they're kind of old school and they're actually got a comic book and they're reading this, and so it's like every which way that you can think about connecting with your consumer is what you want to do. So in addition to all that, for some of these great games, then they can actually, mom can take them to the store and they can buy like pajamas and they can get bedding sheets, and pretty soon they've got this world that they've created with the help of Cartoon Network and their licensing program to allow, Johnny or Janie to like sit in his or her room that's all about this one particular brand of entertainment, and then they can engage with it on their mobile device or on their TV or however they want to. So that's the whole idea of this, creating this 360 degree or kind of all-encompassing brand. I think I have. Do we have a connection to the internet? Let's see if we can pull this off. There's a couple of videos here on Halo I thought would be kind of fun to watch. Let's see if this actually works. I'm sorry I can't get it bigger. This is for a new game that they're coming out with.
Just came out.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe you can share with your classmates a little bit about it. But it's
It's a game called Halo Wars. It's a strategy game where you basically control different units and you try to take certain objectives, and you have to gather resources and raise different units, and it's a lot of fun. It's one of the new games that Microsoft just launched earlier in March.
You think Halo's doing a pretty good job of building a universe? I've been talking a lot about it. You sound like you know way more about it than I do.
Yeah, they've crafted quite the experience with around the launches. They usually come out with books. They come out with short videos usually. I know for the last Halo game, they released 3 different books that told stories around the main game.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also came out with a short web video series as well, so they're making it an immersive experience.
So that's cool. So like they have this video game, and then you've got all of these different other ways to engage, and that's not even talking about all the merchandise that you can buy,
they
right?
have action figures, board games, then a radio drama. They put millions and millions of dollars into all the different types. They had a comic book series too.
And this is what I mean by this creating this universe, right? And they're using augmented reality to enhance this experience. But one of the things that I thought was really cool, and we'll see it in this one if we can get it to play.
This baby's yours for 6K. Do we have a deal?
3.
6!
I will get this car for 3K, and this is how.
I'll open with a strategic withdrawal.
Wait, hold on.
You'll counter with a disinformation campaign.
I'll talk to my manager and see what I can do. Just a little longer. I'm talking to no one. Great news! He said we could do 5999.
Then I'll bait you with psychological warfare.
Let me talk to him. He seems more flexible.
A pun? You know I hate puns! You catty little two-faced opposable
Which will prompt a
pun
verbal
sucker.
assault.
I will tear your head off and hang it from the rear view like a No!
With collateral damage.
Sorry. Came off wrong.
The evidence of which will not look good in my online review. And that's how I'll get this car for 3K.
Well played. How about the warrant?
Warranties are for suckers.
Survival ways to take nice no substitutions, no trades.
So John Friend sends me these,
4 days.
and I just loved it because it's like they don't take themselves too seriously, you know? That to me is just like the ultimate. It's like we can even have fun with our, you know, kind of like laughing at ourselves. And in this case, you know, the big, what is his name, do you know?
He's a brute.
Okay, so the brute, you think he's getting, you know, duped by, you know, this general, and then ultimately, at the end of it, he's the smarter of the two because the guy doesn't take the warranty and the car falls apart. And anyway, I loved it because it's just like, okay, we're all about this really serious, powerful game about like all of like saving the world. And by the way, they're all around heroism. So they're trying to, what they stand for, that's why they exist. And then they can kind of laugh at themselves and have a little bit of humor. So it's pretty cool. I had the opportunity, so now jumping a little bit to now we're going to flip a little bit. So I had the opportunity to talk to a guy named Darren Garnham, who was the former chief commercial officer of Mind Candy. Anyone here ever played Mind Candy? Okay, no. It's basically a video game, and what they discovered was through licensed merchandise, they could reach a whole bunch of folks who they could never reach otherwise, right? So if there's video game players, and there was lots of those folks, they could engage with them more through licensed merchandise, but what they could also do is connect with a bunch of people who never played the game through this merchandise, and then maybe that way get them to try out the game. And so he says, digital is fantastic, but limited, right? If you're only on digital, you're not going beyond that world. We wanted to give fans the chance to interact with the brand when they weren't in the space. Then he went on to share, licensing is a great way to acquire digital users. Take World of Wars. In 3 weeks, over 1 million toys entered the UK market. This effectively becomes a form of marketing to drive users as they engage with the brand. And so I love that because, you know, it's just like, how do I connect with more folks? And by the way, whenever you do anything with licensing, and I didn't get into the basics with you guys because you're way too smart for that, but it's all about the idea that I'll give you my brand in exchange for you doing everything and paying me a royalty for the right to use my brand. So I don't invest in any of what you're doing other than I make sure that you're using my brand properly, so there's a whole approval process. And my job is to make sure that the brand is significant and growing so that you stay compelled and engaged in wanting to license it. And so it really is a phenomenal platform, really for both companies, because without the brand, this great product or service gets no visibility. And without the licensee who's got the great product or service, they don't get into the channel that they would like to be in. In this case, if you're Mind Candy and before they hired Darren Garner, they didn't do any licensed merchandise, so they had this phenomenal digital platform, and they weren't connecting with their consumers in any other way. So he's like, hey, let me come in and show you how you can connect with them with a whole host of different products, including apparel and toys and whatnot, so you can build and enhance the experience and connect with them in places that they're not today. So I talked a little bit about this before, so I won't belabor it too much, but this is that whole idea of that 360-degree experience. I had the opportunity to talk to a woman named Christine Cool, that's a cool name actually. And she works for a company called Perfetti Van Mel, which is an acronym PVM, and they actually own the Chupa Chups brand. Does anyone here know what Chupa Chups are? Lollipops. They're actually a global company. They're in a host of countries. They're in the U.S. They're like rooted in Europe, and I think they're headquartered in Spain. So it's not a brand that a lot of us know really well, but they're a brand that's been around for a long time. And one of the cool things about these guys is when they started, and you got to think about this and go, what's the parallel today? But this little nothing company that made candy hired Salvador Dali to create their brand, create their logo, and create their look. Which must have been like, it was like probably the equivalent of like a nothing company buying and producing and buying an ad for the Super Bowl. You know, it's like, I don't know how much it cost for them to do that. They might have sold away their lives. But today, that brand stays refreshed because what they do is they take that same original art and then they give it to a host of designers all over the world who compete for the right to design the next year's whole line of their style guide. And so it's always new, it's always fresh. They keep it within certain parameters, so you can't go outside of those parameters, but it might be new colors, it might be new flares. And so when they have this host of, core group of licensees, they're getting, the licensees love it because they're getting these great designs, new designs, refreshing designs each and every year to help them connect with consumers in a way that is different, more compelling than it would have been if they stayed with the old. But what Christine goes on to say is, licensing is an integral part of our brand marketing strategy to keep brands fresh and on trend. It increases visibility, creating new touch points and new ways to interact with our brand. Licensed products have a longer life than candy, our core products. They increase brand exposure and loyalty. And while revenue is appreciated, it is not our priority. So this is a company that gets this and understands how to use licensing to do what it's intended to do, which is grow brand love and grow consumer connections. She says, we are the world's third biggest candy manufacturer. It's not the licensing is not significant to our total. If we need to say no to a license deal or a category, if it won't help or potentially will hurt, we're fine with that. We don't do deals for the sake of money. My personal example of this is I got to work on the Nagano Olympics for Coca-Cola, and my job was to create Coca-Cola co-branded Olympic merchandise. And so I cut this deal with the Nagano Organizing Committee, and we basically managed it for them. And our reason we were there is we were a huge sponsor, the longest, Coca-Cola Company, the largest contiguous sponsor since back in 1928. They've sponsored every game since. And so they created these phenomenal experiences for consumers, especially fans who maybe could never even get a ticket to a game. They could go and have an Olympic experience. So how did that manifest itself? Well, when I helped Coke with the Salt Lake Olympics, we created this venue called Coca-Cola on the Ice, which was 10,000 square feet, I think. And in there, we had everything from pushing a bobsleigh, a real bobsleigh, to shooting a hockey puck on real ice with real boards, with real glass, to pushing a curling stone, real curling stone from somewhere in Scotland with a bumpy ice, to actually running a luge run, which was a shortened version of the real thing, which was designed by the guy who designed the one for the actual course. So somebody might come and go through that whole experience. And by the way, we had connected with a whole bunch of Olympic, what do you call those, who maybe are going to medal, so like aspiring medalists. And so they came in and enhanced the experience. So for somebody like that who doesn't have a ticket, they've gotten an Olympic experience when they didn't even have a ticket. So my job then was to help create merchandise to memorialize that experience. You've gone to that venue, then you go to the Pin Trading Center, and then you go to the retail store, and you buy something that helps you remember what a cool experience you had, thanks to Coca-Cola, about the Olympics. And then you bring that in your house, and maybe it's a pin set, and you display it on your wall, which is the ultimate, right? So you pay Coca-Cola to put their logos on your wall so you can be proud and show your family and friends your experience at the Olympic Games. And so, to me, that was kind of the ultimate. But tying back to this idea of saying no, when I worked on the Nagano Games, I had a company come to me that made butane lighters. And they said, we'll pay you $1 million in royalty revenues if you give us the right to make these butane lighters. They'll be a great keepsake for the Olympics. And my budget for royalty revenue in 1998 for the Nagano Games was $1 million. So in one deal, I could have made my budget, which meant I would have gotten a nice bonus. But I would have gained $1 million, or maybe even $2 million, who knows how many they would have sold. But I would have probably cost the brand billions of dollars by the connection with cigarettes, right? So in that case, it was pretty much a no-brainer that we were not going to do that. But I have to admit, I thought about it a couple of times before I told them, nah, we can't do it. Darn it. So you do have to say no, and you have to know when to say no. So this gets back to the idea, what does success look like in the engagement business? And I'll just share a little bit more, but it's that whole premise back to the way John Friend thinks about Halo, right? It's about how much, as we said earlier, it's how much time do people play the game? Or think about the brand, right? So Louis, you play this game, you know about the advertisements, you know about the new games that are coming out, you know that they have I guess magazines about it and websites about it. So for Halo, with you, they've done a pretty good job, I would say, you know? And that's kind of what engagement's about, right? Engagement may be literally on the game, playing the game, but it might be just, how much does Lewis think about Halo when he's not playing the game? And if they get you for 5 minutes, that's good. But they might get you for over a span of a week, an hour. I mean, I don't know how you translate that, but you think about the millions of people who play this game. When they're not playing it, they're actually thinking about the game or the universe, really, because that's what they're creating. Then that's kind of, I don't know what the measurement would be, but it would be really, really big. And if they tried to hire a PR agency to equate that, it would probably take up half the balance sheet and cost. Yeah.
Well, even more beyond the game, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and belongingness, which we're going to bring this up to the brand communities. There's a whole online community of players who play against other players.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really appreciate you talking about that, because you're right, that whole community experience is what makes this a universe that people want to be in, right? And I think that's part of the reason when they have these big competitions, you know, the guy or the woman who's playing down on the floor, she belongs to a community. And so there's a whole host of folks that are like sharing her success with her as she's playing. So yeah, I think that's the whole thing is, right, how do brands do a good job of making you feel like they really care about you? And the ones that actually bend over to make that effort are the ones that actually genuinely do care. Yes, sir.
I was going to say the thing interesting with Halo, after Halo's success with Halo 2, it literally did so good that it created a toxicity. It released a toxicity with Halo 3, which was the game of the year, 3 years straight, which is highly 3rd. It came out in 2007 game, still beating any game that he created.
Amazing.
It literally, they created a system for their game alone. So the PlayStation was the game, system they had, but Microsoft had the Xbox strictly for Halo and built other games around it. So we're looking at that, the brand of Halo, that can speak for itself, really made Microsoft gaming platform. The fact that they're still able to do all of this from that name alone, like Halo wasn't just dragging it out, not in a bad way, but there was still, you see the still drawing lines from that perspective. The reason Xbox 360 was great, they stole the whole system pretty much off the success of one game.
I really appreciate you sharing that, and I think that really speaks to the long vision that Microsoft had about getting into the space, right? There's probably a host of other different departments, and you think this department is run by some business unit leader who may not have liked what was going on over at Halo, or actually there's a name of the unit that they did, but they said, look, we're going to protect this because we believe this is the way to go. And the net result is they create this whole entire business unit that is phenomenally successful, as you said. So thank you so much for sharing that. So I like this. If you can't read it, what it says on that case is CAT, which stands for Caterpillar. So Caterpillar sells $49 billion worth of equipment each year. And they have a licensing business that sells about $2 billion, which is not shabby. If I would have told you the reverse, I said, look, their licensing business is $2 billion a year, you'd probably agree with me that was pretty big. But relative to the $49 billion they sell, it's not that big of a percentage. It's, 4%, something like that. They have a major competitor in John Deere who had a similar program. And for whatever reason, a few years ago, and I heard this firsthand through a company that was a licensee of John Deere, who made a bunch of signs and other things like that, they got out of the licensing business, except for a little bit they do at the dealerships. And for him, this was a huge vacuum because he had done this business for like 10 or 15 years, and then all of a sudden, Deere walked away from it, and he had to figure out what he was going to do. But the story here is more of, why would John Deere do that? And I don't really have a good answer, but what I can tell you is why does the Caterpillar, get into licensing? And the reason they get into licensing is because there's got a certain point in someone's life when buying a Caterpillar tractor makes sense. But outside of that, they don't touch those folks, they don't touch people very often. But if they created a whole line of merchandise that really espoused their brand, everything from role-play toys for kids, so they're connecting with these children with the brand at a 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 year old level, to hey, if I put that Caterpillar mobile phone protector around my phone, I can actually run over it and it won't break. Then they have an opportunity to influence a whole host of folks who might one day maybe buy the Caterpillar tractor, but maybe never buy it, but might become a shareholder. Or just become somebody who really loves the brand and likes to speak highly of it. And, I love my Caterpillar mobile phone protector. I can throw this thing and it still won't break, Or in the case of a young child who ultimately says one day, when they are in the decision-making point, do I buy an International Harvester tractor? Do I buy a John Deere tractor? Do I buy a Caterpillar tractor? It's going to be hard for them to buy anything but Caterpillar. In the words of a friend of mine who works for Coca-Cola, if somebody buys a Coke t-shirt, it's really hard for them to buy a Pepsi to drink, right? You can't wear a Coke t-shirt and then buy a competitive brand. I mean, you might do it, but it's kind of like, it's hard to overcome because you've already connected with that brand. And I thought, hey, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because you could catch a lot of flack if you went into like a, like the gas station and had your Coke t-shirt on and came out with a Pepsi. People might be looking at you cross-eyed. So how do you find your expansion point? And what I mean by this is, gets back to this whole example of a Ferrari, right? What is that emotional connection? Because the emotional connection is the point where you can expand or where you pivot from. And so you really need to understand your brand well. A lot of brands, they get into the space and they go, well, let's do some research and figure out where consumers want us to be, and we'll just sell merchandise with our logo on that particular category. But that completely discounts why you, as brand owners and brand builders, are creating your brand and why you exist and what you're trying to accomplish. So if you know what your brand position is, you know what your brand promise is, then that in there is your expansion point, and that's where you need to think about, okay, I'm not about luxury. Yeah, my brand is very expensive, but what I really got is speed. And so how do I connect with consumers around that point of speed? Or in the case of another brand, that particular point of connection. So as you think about the brands that you've worked for or will work for or you're working for today, really give that consideration, because that's going to make the difference between not only being successful in the sale of whatever that product is, so your licensees are going to be happy and you're going to be happy, but it's really building that brand equity around that point of why you exist in the marketplace. So this is all around Bob the Builder, and I had the opportunity to interview Holly Schulman, who worked for Hit Entertainment, and I loved what she said, because this whole idea was that she had come connected with this property, and she saw immediately that the property, this whole show, these characters look like toys, which doesn't normally happen, right? You have a character, and then you find a toy, and then people go, okay, that's the character. Okay, I can kind of see a resemblance, right, between the toy and the character. In this case, they could make them just like the character. And so she was going to the licensing show, and she had gotten feedback from Hasbro and Mattel that they both wanted to license Bob the Builder. And so her question was, okay, who do I go with? They're both phenomenally successful toy manufacturers. If I choose right, I'm going to be very, very successful. And what she shared was, which I loved, was in June of 1999, executives Hasbro and Mattel expressed interest. When I was presented a vision from both toy companies, I knew the right one would help us make the perfect souffle. Hasbro wanted to create a preschool world. Mattel was interested in the anthropomorphic style of the vehicles for the Matchbox brand. So somebody wanted to create a preschool world, and the other one wanted to use it to go into not even into the Mattel brand, but the sub-brand Matchbox. So for her, she's like, we love the bigger preschool concept that went to Hasbro. Which, if you think about it, makes a lot of sense, right? Even if Mattel is dangling a larger royalty revenue check in front of you, that's not what you're doing it for. Because remember, that's beyond tertiary. What's the word that goes after tertiary? Like the sixth level? That's where this royalty revenue should be considered, instead of where everybody puts it, most people put it today, which is at the first level. You think about how you build your brand, how you connect with your consumer, how you delight your consumer. And for them, it just made perfect sense to go with Hasbro. So here's Salvador Dali, and here's Chupa Chups, so I might have stole a little bit of my thunder earlier. But I think there was another reason why I did this. And it was all around this idea of evolution. And so, what they could do was, they have this 1968 Salvador Dali style, but they never lost their roots with it, right? They kept that original. It's almost like, what Major League Baseball did, right? They had these new authentics that people were wearing, but they could go back to the Brooklyn Dodgers, or they could go back to uniforms worn by the Yankees, 20, 30, 40, 60 years ago. And so they were connecting with their roots in a really powerful way, and that enabled them to put freshness into their concept. And in their words, in the words of Christine, she said, we need to be on the ball to have new partners launching our product. We wanted to create new design materials and retail programs to stay ahead of our competitors. The way we worked around this is by giving licensees visual assets to create differential products and ideas for experiences at retail, and the combination with the candy to improve the experience, right? So it's like, how do we make this experience, this world, for somebody who loves Chupa Chups even better? And that's the way that they do it. I've got, what, 7 minutes, Professor?
Yeah.
Okay. We're getting close. So how do you judge the value of what we do? And the questions that my co-author wrote are, how does your customer engagement convert into sales? Is it a case of engage and they will buy? Or is it more complicated than that? So this is more of a reflection on what is it you're trying to do when you have a brand, right? Is it just interrupt them and then maybe they'll purchase? Or is it more like what you were saying, Lois? It's like, or the gentleman, what's your name, sir? Jonathan? What you said about what Halo does, right? Is it really thoughtfully consider who their consumers are, who their enthusiasts are, who are the players, and how do they create an experience that will make them not only buy, but play, and then ultimately be advocates, right? Because there's no better way to sell a brand than have somebody like who's your best friend tell you, you've got to buy this is the best thing ever, or you've got to try this is the best thing ever. And so when you can pass off that responsibility to the folks that are actually customers, then you know you've like really landed in the right place. So nobody does it better than Disney, and I give myself pride because I waited to like the 24th slide to talk about Disney. But I had this great conversation with Tim Kilpin, who was a former senior executive at Disney, and then ultimately he was a senior executive at Mattel, and now he's a consultant. I don't know how much money he charges, but he told me back, and Mickey is about 90-something years old, but when Mickey turned 75, there was kind of a little bit of a lull period for the character, and they wanted to connect with folks, and especially folks who had grown up with the brand, and so they decided to design this whole high-level apparel that was sold into Fred Siegel, and the whole idea was not, it was really around the idea of just engaging with the consumers in a fun, upscale way, and so they created this apparel, they dressed models in it, and then they didn't have really any kind of like, there wasn't any big like story beyond it, but it was just like, hey, this is cool enough for models to wear, then you can too enjoy that experience. And so they were trying to revitalize and renew the character, and so ultimately they did this high-end marquee program. They sold it to Fred Siegel, and they seated them with celebrities, but no entertainment aspect. And ultimately, it was just to remind fans why consumers love the brand. And I did some research on this, and this was like 15 years ago. This line is still in the top 100 today, and still performs exceedingly well. And it wasn't even like one of their like major initiatives. It was just something they wanted to do to kind of remind people why they love the brand. And that's Disney. They just surround you in a way that you can't help but love, right? Because it's just a phenomenal, fun experience. My daughter, who's 8, well, I have twins, but one of them is 18. They're both 18. She's 28 minutes older than her sister, so. But she loves Disney World, and she'd go there every week if she could. And I don't know what it is, and I've gone several times, and I'm always entertained, but for her, it's a magical experience. And that's what makes Disney so great. So this whole idea, do you need to have broad appeal to be global? And, what I say about this is that it's important if you have a brand that only hits a narrow audience, to consider whether or not that's the right place for you to be. And in some instances it is, right? You're connecting with that thin target consumer frame, and you're doing everything you want to do. But is there an opportunity for you to expand beyond that? In my case, I talked to a gentleman named Bill Shaw, who is like the number 2 guy at Entrepreneur Media. And for them, Entrepreneur Media is primarily a magazine, but it's also a website and a host of other things that they're doing. But they're in North America. They're really a United States company. But they knew their brand was so strong that others outside of the company, in fact, like on their website, I think 50% or 60% of the hits were from outside the country. So they said, look, we can establish Entrepreneur Magazine in these other countries. And today they've done it in like 6 or 7. India is one, the Philippines is another, Mexico is another. And so this gives them an opportunity to reach this audience well beyond their footprint. And so that's one cool thing they're doing. But the other one that I help them with is to say, we're about thought leadership in the area of how to grow companies, right? We give expertise on, how to think about what kind of company to form, LLC or S Corp or whatever. And then we give them legal advice, and then we give them investment advice. And so what we said was, okay, there's a whole toolbox of services that can come from this thought leadership. And so we did a deal with a coaching company, so business coaching branded Entrepreneur, Entrepreneur Lending, Entrepreneur Legal. And so this way they could take what they've been doing for 40 years and actually extend it in a way that those companies that actually provide these services could connect with their consumer in a much more compelling way. So since we're out of time, I probably should finish. But we pretty much got through everything. And so I would just say, hopefully the thing that you can take from this is that licensing offers a really great opportunity to connect in ways that you cannot connect on your own. But before you venture into that area, really think about your brand, think about what it stands for, why you do what you do, and then what you do and how you do it. And then figure out, okay, what's that universe look like, and how can I draw on resources to make that experience the best it can be. And in the case of like Halo with Microsoft or Hasbro, these are companies, or of course Disney, including Disney bought Marvel and bought Lucasfilm. And in fact, Rogue One was a creation they came up with that was beyond George Lucas. So that's the idea that you can do with brand extensions. And so I think you're talking to a senior group of folks who are getting their master's degree, this is what I hope you'll take away, in addition to the idea that this is just a tactic. So thank you very much for your time.
Can you give an example of a brand licensing that failed?
Yes.
And explain why it failed.
Yes. So, and it's funny, I spoke to an MBA class recently, and I showed them some examples. And one of the people there was, I think, either going to get hired by Colgate or become an intern for Colgate. So he was talking all about this great company he was joining, which is a great company. But Colgate, and I don't know how many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, came out with Colgate frozen entrees.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so you guys know this. Why did that fail? And I'll give you another. Well, yeah, why does Colgate exist? To give you great oral hygiene, right? To keep your smiles bright and your teeth in your mouth until hopefully it's dead. And they're trying to sell food? Okay, here's another one.
We're ready for you.
Zip lighters, right? Came out with a line of perfume.
It's still available in Iran.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, let me think of
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys got this. But basically the idea is, and there's a few more that maybe come to me in this group, it's like, really think through what you're supposed to be doing. And maybe, again, when I see this kind of examples, and when I joined Rubbermeat 10 years ago, whatever it was, they were doing kind of stupid things like this too. Not that bad, but like getting into deals where you like go, huh? You know, Stanley does a great job now with their licensing program. But back in 1998 when they were sucking wind, they did a line of Christmas tree light timers. And not only did they do that line, it was the most abysmal looking Christmas tree light timer you'll ever see. It was a black box with a tiny little Stanley logo on it. And my, you know, I talked about the 10 pitfalls of brand licensing, and one of them is don't logo slap. And the way you can tell whether you logo slapped or not is if you pull off the logo and you can't tell what brand it is, that's logo slap, right? So this was an abysmal example of like a product that they licensed, and if you pull that off, it was just a black box. But why were they in Christmas tree light timers? I mean, seriously. But today, they're doing some really cool stuff with like flashlights and sound attenuators, and they've got a great color, you know, palette and style guide, and they've gotten out of that kind of like crazy world they were in, which was all about just driving more money to the bottom line. So don't do that. Thanks a lot, guys. And I'll make this presentation available, so if you guys want it. And all my notes are in there, so go for it.
Thank you.
My
So
pleasure.
once I get that, I will upload that. And back at 8:30? Okay.
Yes. Are you ready, Louis? I'm ready. So excited.
Oh, you're presenting. That's why you're in a jacket. Suit.
Great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, I should have to say one more thing. I have launched a website called PeteCanalicchio.com, and sorry guys, I should have shared this earlier, but I just want to share with you now. If you go to PeteCanalicchio.com, and I'll leave a few business cards, there's 3 levels of access to a whole host of information. In fact, I'll share it with you. I'll just leave an email.
Okay.
But the first level is called Fast Track. It's all free. It's like, what is this industry? There's examples of the pitfalls are in there, the benefits are in there, kind of like how it works is in there. And then there's 2 other levels that are paid. But the whole idea is it's more about engaging with folks and really understanding this industry. So I encourage you to sign up for at least the Fast Tracks and see what's there, and kind of continue the learning process that relates to licensing stuff.
I think that's why he also has his booklet on brand licensing.
Yes, yes. And hopefully by the end of this year I'll have the book, which is called Lasso the World. And Lasso is an acronym for Lateral Addictive Stored Scalable Learning.
Oh, wow. So, great. Thank you very much.
Great to see you
Okay.
again, Professor. Take care.
And you got all your stuff, right? Okay. So I think so. To make sure. You got your thumb drive also.
I never...
Oh, you didn't use a thumb drive?
Yeah, no, I must have used it, but let me just see.
Is this yours?
No, that's not...
Okay.
Oh. No, I'll just confirm that I have my thumb drive. I'm pretty sure I do. There's 2 of them in here.
Hey, I just want to say thank you. It was great.
Oh, my pleasure.
I want to show you something real quick. I had a
Yeah,
friend of mine
please.
that worked for years ago for a really crappy electronics company, and she was in a meeting and pulled this speaker out.
Brand.
Logo slapping.
Yeah, yeah.
That came from straight from the factory. Put brand where, you know, their brand was.
That's terrible. That is so terrible. That is so pathetic.
I know.
Well, remarkably, Stanley did. I mean, they're doing a good job now, so they figured it out. But there's not many companies that can recover from that. But I think, for the most part, consumers can forgive if you've done a good job in everything else that you've done. So,
It's not yours.
that is not mine, but I don't actually see mine
Oh.
because it's right here. Thank you for asking, Professor.
Oh, we put it there.
Yeah.
Okay, we normally put it there. So.
I'm like, I know I have another one somewhere.
Great. I'm glad you found it. So.
Well, when's your semester over?
Got a couple more, about 4 or 5 more weeks.
2 more weeks, 2 more classes.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, because this is only 8 weeks classes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Gotcha.
But then we go on till 9:45 officially.
Yeah, so it's a 3-hour class. For your benefit too.
Yeah. I know.
All right, take care.
Thank you, thank you.
My pleasure.